All right, well, welcome back. We're here for another episode of our Connected Culture Chats, where Andy and I chat with folks in different organizations, different lines of business, different job roles, just chatting about all things workplace, making the workplace a kinder place. And today we are grateful to be joined by Eden Lopez. He's the Deputy Director focused on organization capacity building and overarching staff management for OPHI. That's the Oregon Public Health Institute. And Eden comes to OPHI and us with 10 years in community-based organization leadership roles in Washington County. Born in Michoacán, Mexico, Eden immigrated to the U.S. when he was only 5 years old, and Eden was the first member of his family to attend college. He used his firsthand experience successfully navigating the challenges of higher education to mentor other first-generation students. Eden holds a BA in accounting from Portland State University, and outside of work, Eden serves on the City of Cornelius City Council and is a Community Housing Fund board member. Most importantly, he is a husband and father of two. I love that. I love that that's your most importantly. Thank you. Well, welcome. Thanks for chatting with Andy and I today. We're going to talk about EQ and lots of other things, but first, tell us what you like the most about your job, your current role.
Thank you, Rachel. Happy to be here. Thank you, Andy. I like working with people. I like development. I like making the connections with folks.
We love people. People are what make it fun. Right?
Yeah, I really enjoy it. I didn't realize that. I have a degree in accounting, and when I got done with that degree, I wanted nothing to do with accounting.
So the numbers weren't as exciting as the people.
I know, it's not the most people-centric.
Yeah. The numbers are good. There's a lot of regulation, a lot of rules. There's a lot of reading and following structure, which is great, and I can function in that. But I really enjoy working with people. I like giving back to the community, and my personality didn't seem to fit in with the rest of the folks that I saw in those classes, and I just felt out of sorts. I got the degree, so when I got out of college, I felt like I needed to give back to the community, but because I felt that the community assisted me, as you mentioned, when I got here as a young child. I think the most impactful people in my life were teachers and parents. The parents that showed up to volunteer that helped me learn English as a second language. They were definitely impactful to me, and I always felt like a debt, like I owed something to the community because I didn't expect that, but I'm grateful that they did. And so my point was, coming out of college, I was like, I don't want to do accounting. So I looked for a job. They were looking for someone that spoke Spanish, providing assistance with protective order advocacy at Washington County through the Domestic Violence Resource Center. And I excelled at it. And because I have my, oddly enough, because I had my accounting degree, they saw that there was a need for a financial director, and so eventually I got promoted to finance. I did that for that nonprofit for a few years. Then I went over to work for Centro Cultural doing the similar job. I ended up getting burnt out because it's a lot of working with members, invoicing, with a bookkeeper, a lot of the operations, and not necessarily a lot of working with people. And I actually
that connection. Connectivity points.
Yeah.
I think that's a solid point, though, right? Like, there are people who like numbers and want to do it, but if you don't do what you're passionate about, which is connecting with people over a period of time, and probably not that long, you do get burnt out, right? So this is why we have to find our why and what speaks to us, although otherwise we're going to be down in burnout. It's going to come quicker.
Yep, exactly. And that's what led me, I took a few months off of work. I just burnt out. There's life things that were going outside of work that also impacted that.
Wait a minute, you mean we don't leave our personal life at the door when we come to work? What?
No. It was impactful, and I just needed some time. I felt it was scary. It wasn't an easy decision. I made
Yeah,
I bring the bread, I guess.
The money's real, right?
Yeah.
You gotta have that cycle coming in. Pay the bills.
Yes. I have to communicate with my wife, make sure we're on the same plan, and she agreed.
Totally.
And that gets to my point to answering your question. So, I was off. It was prior to the pandemic. I was actually looking back at it. It was fortunate that that's when I took it. Because I think right after the pandemic started, my boss reached out. My old boss from my previous job reached out. They were looking for people to help out with the pandemic. And then she sent me the link. I applied. She gave me a good reference, and I started working with OPHI in their tracing health department, working with local public health departments. Specifically, I got hired on to work here locally. But they were just expanding. They added Spokane not long after, and then they added a lot of counties in California. The point being, I got a chance to really work with people, a lot of young folks from different parts of the Pacific Northwest, and I loved it. I loved being a supervisor. I got promoted to be a manager. Then deputy director, and now operations. I'm kind of back now to working with members and spreadsheets.
So now we got to offset that burnout with enough people interaction, right?
Yes. So I'm finding myself in that similar location, but more fortunate. I think my perspective has changed now where I'm at. So my point being, I like working with people. I like the agency. I like giving back to the community. That's why I like working for OPHI.
One of the things that I love with this story is I think that people think I've gone down this road, i.e. accounting. I've gone down this road, and now because I've gotten my degree and I've done this thing and I got to get this job and I'm in this space and I just can't move. Like this is it until I retire. And the reality. Yeah, I didn't want to be that dramatic, but this is it until it's all over.
Yes.
And the reality is, thankfully, we're always sort of growing and developing. And so at some point you were like, nah, looking at spreadsheets is not going to be the thing for me. Yeah. Like, I want to interact with people. And I think it's such an important message for people to understand that you can, every single person can really take that second, take a breath, work out where is it that I want to go next, create a plan. So this is not me saying quit your job and start your family. This is me saying you can create a plan to move to the next phase of what you want to do in your life. And it's totally okay. Who cares if you got your degree in accounting and you never use accounting again? The important point is to be content, to be happy, to be excited about showing up to work. So I just love this story because it just shows that your life can take this trajectory, and sometimes you keep evolving back to accounting, and then you keep adjusting a little more to move into the space that you want to again. And I think that that's so much of what people need to understand life should be about, not the other piece.
Pivot.
Yeah.
I mean, they say now too, people have three careers.
Sorry.
That's right.
Pivot.
That was my homage to Matthew Perry.
Yeah. Rest in peace, Matthew Perry.
But they say now people have like three careers because we're living longer, we're working longer. Like, I cannot imagine doing the same thing I did at 25 that I would do until I was 75. I mean, it's not realistic either, you know. Three
think about what 25 is.
No, I don't want to.
You're like, no. Where is life? Like, what is happening? You know, and I think this is a great lesson. I think for parents too, right? Is like we're pushing our kids to be X, not allowing kind of the process of exploring what even college should be. You think about high school now for kids; they've basically got to have their entire college plan figured out freshman year of high school. Yeah. I'm like, you know how many elective classes you're going to take that you're going to be like, oh, I really enjoy this, or you know,
underwater basket weaving. What is that? I don't know. Go find out.
That's right. So to your point, Rachel, the transition in careers comes because we're putting such a requirement so early on in life to have it all figured out, and it's like, sorry, we don't.
I agree. I read this somewhere where maybe it was social media or something. You know, sometimes people have shared good information about why wasn't I advised in my 20s that I don't have to have it figured out. I don't need to know what I need, where I want to go, what my specific skill set is. Why wasn't I told that this is actually the time you
That it
should
was
be
okay.
exploring? You
Yeah.
don't have a lot of responsibilities. That's exactly what you
And
should
quite
be
frankly,
doing.
you don't know. Like we're
Yeah,
constantly
yes, and
evolving.
that's
Like how
okay.
could you
Yeah,
possibly know?
yeah,
That's
yeah.
the discovery. There's a great book actually, The Quarter Life Crisis, that really talks exactly about this. And I read it at 25, and now I recommend it to all my younger clients. Like you don't need to know. We have these expectations, and we talk a lot about our shoulds. You know, all these things we should be doing, and what the family life should look like, and all that. But you don't need to know. Figure out what you want. You know, and Andy and I have a couple clients too where they're looking to retire, but they're too young to not do anything. So what does that look like? What's that transition period? You know, how are you setting yourself up? How are you feeling good about retiring? Because a lot of people even struggle with that, right? If I'm not working, then what's my worth?
What's my value? Yep.
Yeah. You remind me of
So-
something that I don't think I've shared much at all, like outside, my close relatives and family. That in college, I took a lot of classes. I took 6 years to graduate out of college. My favorite classes were Chicano Latino studies. I also took Spanish. I got a minor in Spanish. We have these expectations. You have to do it in 4 years, and you have to come
That's
out and get a good job, and and some of it's culture, right? Some of our parents are like, hey, I didn't come here for you to spend 8 years in college and then come out and not get a good paying job to support yourself, to help out. There's these other external pressures.
Yeah, for sure.
But it helped me so much because my biggest struggle has always been about identity. And I didn't think about, I struggled in middle school a lot with grades and my first year of high school because I was caught in the middle. I didn't know where I belong because, you're in school, you have to have a different understanding of the mainstream culture. You have to speak a certain way. You have to talk a certain way. When you go back home, with the immigrant family, there's a different culture at home. There's different expectations. And I didn't know how to show up in either or because I would get, negative feedback if I was maybe too Mexican at school, or maybe I was being too American at home. And it's like, what are you doing? We didn't bring you here for you to become an American. You have to remember where you come from and so on. And so I think the most important classes that I took in college were, Chicano Latino, because it spoke, about our history, which I had never learned about. And I'm still discovering, and I'm still, when I get a chance doing deep dives into trying to figure out, who I am as a whole. And I've come to the conclusion, that if you have strong roots, a good understanding of who you are, other people can't tell you where you belong or where you should be.
That's right.
Your history. You know that, you belong wherever you want to go. That
That's
we
right.
have thousands of years in this continent, and someone with, 200 years or so coming in and telling you, like, hey, you don't belong. It's like, really? Like, I would say otherwise. But anyways, my point being that,
No.
it triggered that thought, like, oh, yeah.
It's really true, and I think this is something that is very unique to certainly first generation, where our parents immigrate to this country. And I struggle with this word assimilation because I do think that you come to a country, you should have respect for that country's culture, learning that country's language, whether it's here in America, which is not a popular thing to say, or if you move to Korea. I can't expect for them to assimilate to me. So I think that there definitely is something to that. I also think that the struggle sits in this spot where it's like, I grew up in Orange County. My mom is not Black American. She is Jamaican. Jamaican and Caribbean culture and West Indian culture is very different from Black American culture. The experience is very different. And so you come in and you're like, this way, and someone's like, well, you're not, I used to get all the time, you don't sound Black, you're not Black enough, that type of thing. And then, on this side, it's like, yeah, you're cool, but, you're Black. So you really do struggle to like, where am I? Where do I fit? Where do I fit in this picture? But I think ultimately, what I love about what you said is you cannot be defined by whomever. You can't be defined by your family and your family's culture because it's not the same. You're literally growing up in a different country where your classmates are different people. Your classmates maybe even speak multiple languages. You're eating different foods. You're seeing different ways in which people behave. So your experience is even different from what your family's expectation is. And I think that can sometimes be the struggle with immigrant families, is it's like, don't forget you're Jamaican. And it's like, well, I can't forget I'm Jamaican. Like, just, it is. But I am not going to, I get this all the time from my Jamaican family. You're so American. And it's like, yes, of course I am. I'm very American. I grew up in America.
Yeah.
Of course I'm going to be American. So identifying, I think that this, what you said is such and I close my eyes because it's such a huge piece of where people struggle today, particularly immigrants. Where they struggle is because you are in this mixed set of almost defining your own culture for yourself. And that can be very, very difficult.
And isolating. Feels lonely.
Incredibly isolating. Incredibly isolating. Because you can't go to your family. You can't go to your friends. It's not happening at school. The teachers don't understand. If you participate in church or community activities, those are usually a lot around what your family thinks and believes. Very, very isolating. What I do like about this generation coming up, though, the Generation Z, is they're like, don't care. Say what you want. Like, I'm living my life. Like, it's something I feel like those of us who are older certainly can take note of, to be like, they are living free. Sometimes I think we judge it, and maybe rightfully
just
so.
We're jealous.
But maybe it's that, let's take note. Let us take note that they do not have the same barriers, the same boundaries, the same stresses. Granted, I also don't think they have the same resiliency, but they don't have the same stresses because they're just like, listen, this is me, and accept it or don't.
But part of that comes from paving the way, right? Because they're not the first people to go through this either, right? So the more immigration we have, the more we do assimilate, and where we are more global, then it does become, I'll say easier, just because I don't have a better word, but more acceptable, right? And
it might be that they haven't run into the systems that we've run into, because maybe we ran into the systems at a younger age, where I recall I ran into these systems in school. And so I became aware at an early age. I know that's changed, where I'm located.
The hope is that the systems get better, right? The systems are better.
Right. And maybe that'll change, once they get into other systems where they run into those walls, and they ask those same questions that we've had, like, why? Like, just because of the way they look, the way I speak, hopefully not, but I agree. I do like their attitude, Andy.
Well, I don't know that I can relate to in the same way, obviously, because I look the way I do in a white dominant culture here. But I moved out to this very rural part of Oregon, and I decided that it was probably easier from a Jew from New York than it is that I moved up from California. I'm not sure which makes them more like, what? They're like, a Jewish person? I've never seen a Jewish person. What is that? We all experience things, in different ways, and feel like we fit in, feel like we don't, and what that experience is. And as long as we, have our self-awareness, which I think is really what you teed on there, Eden, on like, when we feel confident and comfortable in our own skin, you can't take me down. I'm comfortable with where I'm at. Like, I know where I'm going, and I know what life looks like for me, and I feel more confident in that. But again, it's a process. It's not easy.
One of your comments that you made, Andy, I think made me think of why I like the work that I did with Tracing Health, working during the pandemic, providing COVID assistance. Part of it was because I got a chance to share with folks that are also from similar communities that experience, being vulnerable about it. First, as a supervisor and manager, you have to put yourself out there. You have to share that experience. But it is lonely until you start talking about it with other folks that share the same experience. And I think it's almost like, oh, it's okay that I'm feeling this way. It's okay that I went through this. This is part of the process. And yes, I can be more. There is a career for me. There is a spot for me. To what you're kind of saying, Rachel, that we've paved the way for this. Now that we've paved the road, I think part of the way I go about things is now I got to share that experience so that other folks know that, yes, you can do it. Yes, we have similar, upbringing, similar experiences, that it's not specifically just to one culture, that a lot of cultures, go through that same experience, especially, recent immigrants, which,
I think in that line, is sort of talk about self-awareness, and that goes, I think, right along with emotional intelligence, like this idea that you're okay, and that maybe I do need to share my own experiences with even the people who they don't even have to look like me, right? I mean, like Rachel, I share a lot with Rachel, and sometimes, interestingly enough, we're on opposing sides, and she's fighting what should be my fight, and I'm fighting what should be her fight, right? And it's such a great opportunity to really
there was that word again.
But it's just a great opportunity to gain perspective, right? To really try and, let me see where someone else is coming from, someone else's point of view, understand how someone else is dealing with this stuff, like I am, or I think to Rachel, your point earlier, like, I'm a New York Jew. That's a whole can in and of itself, right? Just depending on where you're at. So I think even if it's not a one-to-one, I think understanding other people's experiences, even if it's, even if it is the mass majority, and I'm just going to pick on white males. Even if it is white males, I still want to understand their experience, because just because I think I have it in my head and I think that I know it, I have no idea. I have no idea. And we might have, and probably we often do for all of us, more in common than we really have that separate us, right? And so it's just this great way to kind of, I think, actively listen and be open to the learning part of how we coexist.
Practicing
and be empathic to it, right? Yeah. Like because we all have our stories, and this is really one of the reasons. I think we're touching on exactly why Andy and I don't really talk too much about DE and I, because we're more focused on the B, right, and the belonging. Because everybody does have their story, and we want diversity in thought, we want diversity in experience, and that's not limited to where you come from, what you look like, what your gender is, what your religion is, all of these things. It's like we all really have unique experiences, because at the end of the day, we're walking through this life alone. We've got family and friends and whatever, but like it's us and it's our experience. There's not somebody with us 24/7 processing things in the same way that we are. And so we really do all have a variety of experiences that are all valued and needed in the conversation. And to be brave, we call it psychological bravery, but to be brave, to be authentic, and like you said, vulnerable, to share those experiences where people feel like, no, I'm not alone. No, our experience is not the same. We are not identical, but I'm not alone. And I know people have feelings, we feel things in similar ways. That is universal, our emotions.
No. I agree. Totally agree on that.
What an opportunity to connect to that, though, right? Because I think that is probably where we see, in my humble opinion, particularly here in the United States, where we see the biggest gap is that we won't just take a second to try and understand the other person's experience. We automatically, and I'm going to say this with all of the peace and love, empathy that I can, sometimes we're sitting in our own victimhood, and we're not prepared to have to step into this uncomfortable space of, oh, you mean you have life experiences too, that I shouldn't be comparing to better or worse, or, mine is so horrible, so just you be quiet and listen to mine. Understanding that we're all experiencing something. What a great way to build that connectivity between all of us. Which I think that would be the interesting thing. That's I think where we struggle so much is just trying to connect back together. Like, it's okay. Mine isn't any worse than yours, Eden. But
we're so quick to put a judgment on things. Like, everything needs a label. It has to be good or bad, better, worse, this, that, so we can make sense of it all. Well, maybe there's no sense making, and we just have to listen
That's right.
and connect.
That's right.
There's no answer. There's no right answer.
Yeah.
It's just an opportunity to connect.
And support each other, right? And build community, and just to have a nice, safe space. I think one of the things I shared this with you, Rachel. And this is what you're talking about, Andy. I think
Imposter
syndrome.
Yeah.
And I shared that with you, Rachel. And I think
Yeah.
it was like an aha moment. Like, oh, it's not just people of color. Like, women have this as well. Like in a job, and I was like, for me, it was just like, oh,
Yeah.
and it's communicating, right? It's sharing, it's being vulnerable. If I wouldn't have, like, hey, I'm going through this, I never would have figured that out. But we have a lot of this stuff in common. But because we make assumptions, because we come in and say, well, this is so and so, we put people in cubicles or in squares, that we never share these ideas. We never find out, that people are going through similar experiences, and it doesn't matter what.
And we don't
like.
give validation to it.
Yeah.
We immediately shut down. I think Rachel and I are agreed, though we don't have this, but it's like, if Rachel came, in some situations, Rachel comes to me with her complaints, it's like, please, you've never been a black woman in the workplace. You know what I mean? Like, I immediately shut down what her experience is. And we're, again, stepping out of this idea that everything's binary. Like, mine is worse than what you could ever experience, or yours is fine and mine is the one that's bad. It really is trying to step out of that space and really, again, we use this word all the time, but just connect back with the person. Let me understand where you're coming from. Let me understand what your experience is. What are the things, and I'm not saying we have to all walk around here like kumbayaing it in, a love circle, but I think certainly
You're not?
Well, Rachel, do we kumbaya it? Sometimes. I think it's the idea of like, how can I be an active learner? Very, very interested in learning more than you listening and just hearing what all my stuff is. How can I really be prepared to learn about your stuff and find that commonality that connects us? I think, again, we'll say the word connection till the end of time, but it's what we as humans are designed to do. I mean, it's how we thrive.
And when we don't, that's where we see like
all this
the burnout, the isolation, the concrete jungle, and the effects of mental, what that's doing to our mental health of not being able to connect. I mean, loneliness is a epidemic in our country because we don't connect and like actually see people. And and I'm glad you brought up that story of talking about the imposter syndrome, because if you're not brave enough to share that, or authentic enough to share that, how are we ever going to connect and say, oh wait, you experienced that too, I experienced that too? And I think sometimes too, we're quick to, okay, yes, we're not alone, this is a thing, we've got a name for it, we've got vocabulary for it, which totally helps. I'm a big fan of like, defining it and know that, this is a thing that we all experience. But I know even I'm quick to do this, like, okay, so what do we do about it? Well, maybe there's nothing to do about it. Maybe sometimes the thing is to accept it and acknowledge it and sit with it for a little bit. And then maybe we'll do something, maybe down the road we will, but we're so quick to be action. And sometimes maybe for the time being, it's enough just to say, yeah, this is how I feel. This is what I'm experiencing. Oh, there's a name for it. Cool.
I have a good example of that recently, because with my boss, who Rachel, I was talking to her with Emily. And I think I was talking, I forget how the discussion got there, but...
We're talking about my amazing coaching.
Yes. It was following that. And we were talking about how, I think at one point during the last couple of years, we looked at how communities of color or people of color have difficulties in the interview process because, again, they have to put, this mask on when they go to the interview. And a lot of times you don't have a lot of folks that look like you in the interview process, especially, as you go up the professional ladder, that there's less and less. I think we were discussing DEI and statements that, corporations or agencies put out there. That a lot of times they're just statements. There's no follow through, there's no systems in place. And you figure that out, during the interview process, and you're like, oh, that was just, and so,
vaporware. Look at this pretty. Look over here.
Yeah.
Pay no attention to behind the curtain.
Yeah, and but I think in this particular case, we were talking about, how do you hire someone that has good DEI experience, but also technical skills that you know they're going to be able to do the job that you're hiring them for. And I was sharing with my boss that that's hard as a person of color, because first making that connection with folks, trying to read the room, and then also when do you know you're sharing too much about DEI? When is it like, oh, that's all they're focused on? They don't really know the technical job or the technical work. And she gave me a great pointer. Just say that you have lived experience. Just call it out. Just say that just state that out there. Make a statement. I know this because of my experience of where I come from.
Yeah.
Let's get to the technical part of this job. What do you want to know about the job? Calling it out, because I think sometimes, and I wouldn't. Well, I guess my point is I wouldn't have known that, or I wouldn't have had that perspective if I wouldn't have shared this with her.
Like to feel like it was okay to just say it.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah. And that's the bravery part, right? Like, it's hard to do, because then you're like, what's the there's been so many voices over the years in your experience of ramifications because you just say that. Mm-hmm. It's like, but the other thing too is, how does it not become a separate conversation, right? And I don't think we've cracked that nut as a culture, whether it's work or life or whatever, where it is just the conversation, right? We're not having a DE&I conversation and a can you technically do the job. It's like, tell me about you, all of you. I mean, I love how you introduce yourself as being a first generation immigrant to the United States. Like, again, not to make assumptions, and we have to connect on it, but this isn't exactly what we were going to talk about today, but this is exactly where the conversation needed to go, right? Because we want to know more about that. That's what's important to us about you, and learning more about what that experience is, and connecting at that level. So when I identify with somebody who has anxiety, so I talk a lot about destigmatizing mental health in the workplace. Mm-hmm. How do we get more comfortable talking about it? Well, I just say it. I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression at 14 years old. This is something that sometimes it's up, sometimes it's down. Do I talk about it in an interview? Probably not. But when it comes up, but again, that should be okay to talk about.
Right.
But also, it shouldn't matter. Yeah. And I think
that together.
I think the challenge with DE&I today is it really is so specifically your physical demographics that are sort of defining DE&I today, right? Whether that's racial, whether that's sexual orientation, whether that's gender, that's how we're defining DEI today. But I think if we go back to kind of what we're talking about with diversity, equity, inclusivity, belongingness, the point of that is not around pick me because I look like this or because I'm this particular, so that we have the right numbers. That's not the point. The point is, don't exclude people because of those things. So if we get to the point where we start to really think cognitive diversity, where we're really trying to understand how you solve problems, in a job setting. I want to understand how you solve problems. I want to understand how, when conflict arises, how are you solving that? I want to understand, yes, all the technical stuff. What technically do you know?
What do you need to do this job?
I want to know what life experiences brought you to this point. If we start having those types of conversations, it doesn't have to be, if you're comfortable, Rachel, with what brought me here is at 14, I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression, and that took me down this road, and here's how I ended up where I am today. You should not be pinged or dinged because of that, and you shouldn't be awarded because of it either, right? It just is your life and your experience, and now we're trying to figure out you as a person and how you interact with folks and your technical skills and how you problem solve. Will you be a good
not the
fit
fear that I'm going to go out on disability.
Right. It should be,
no, I'm a disability liability.
Exactly. And it's the same way. I was talking to a client once who they were looking to I think there was a position within the university, and it was, they had gone through like 6 months of like various interviews, and they had pinged it down to 2 people, happened to be 2 white males. A new president comes in of the division. They're like, no, that is not going to be the right optics. So we're gonna send this back through the interview process, and I want to make sure we have some women and people of color. And ultimately, they ended up hiring a woman who has now catastrophically failed because they didn't hire for how she was going to lead and how she solved problems. They hired because, well, this is going to look good. We don't have enough women, so we have this open slot, so we're going to stick this woman in this slot.
But I believe that is what you're explaining is exactly the reason why affirmative action is not the way.
It doesn't work. I always get nervous when we start to talk because it's like you can't get to the point of, we need to think about this as individuals. What is our company philosophy? What are our company values? And how are we making sure we're bringing in people that meet those things? It shouldn't be, I say this all the time, I get in trouble, but I say this all the time. Don't hire me because I'm black, or don't hire me because I'm a woman. Just don't disqualify me because of those things. If I don't make the cut, I don't make the cut. Just don't make it about that. Give me the chance to come in and kind of earn the same way. Don't just assign it to your friends that you went to college with and you always all look the same because you all went to the same type of college. Don't do that either. You know what I mean? If we start to just sort of open up and think about,
I have to make a plug.
Yeah.
I gotta make a plug.
Okay,
this
go
is
ahead.
why. So one of the reasons I use predictive index, and this is like a hiring assessment, and whatever assessment you use, whatever. But like, this is why, because people get it. They don't even get through the resume process. They don't even get through understanding that next level of what your skills are, how you problem solve, what your communication style is, right? Because of the address on their resume, because of the conversation they had on the phone and you detect an accent or whatever. So when you send this out to people who apply and then you get your candidate pool, now you're narrowing it down on how they communicate, and not about where they went to college. You can't help but look at that stuff on a resume, where you live. It's on your resume.
It's on your resume.
Yeah. There's studies on this where certain students
change where their home address.
Their
Change where
name.
they went to college.
Change their name. They would change the name, send it in, send both of them in.
Same thing.
Their a true identity, then a fake one. Everything was the same except the name.
Yeah. And you can train people forever on unconscious bias and all the stuff and blah, blah, blah. No. You need a machine to really have unconscious bias.
We're 100 years away from that. Yeah.
I'm like, I think of myself as, mindful in there, and I am sure. and to Andy's point, the other way around, right? Like swinging the pendulum the opposite of saying like, well, maybe this person would be qualified. I don't want to not, is my bias getting in the way because I think they're a woman, or I think this thing about them, blah, 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 So then I bring them in and I hire them, and now they've not done it because I've been so focused on making sure I wasn't excluding them.
That's right.
I thought you were going to go emotional intelligence, because this is where it comes in right as well. If you're the person that's hiring, and you have emotional intelligence, you're going to look for values. Who is this person? What are they bringing? How do they learn? What are their patterns? How do they communicate? Just exactly what you mentioned, right, Rachel?
And yet, I do consider myself relatively good with emotional intelligence, and yet I am sure that I have hired people because I've let the pendulum swing the other way to give them a chance or do something when they just weren't able to do it.
That's right. Yeah. That's right.
Like you, Andy, I'm careful, of the things I say around this, because I've seen that as well in the lower end of the positions, not in management or leadership, where someone's brought in to provide a service. They're brought in because they look like the population they're going to serve, or they speak the language of the population that they're going to serve, but yet they don't have a real understanding of that population. And so after a couple weeks or so, I started to notice that it gets complicated because there's a lot.
And there's things they can't do, and so I think it's important for what you're saying here is like to know when it matters most, when you need somebody who can speak to the population that you're serving with that. But if there's other components of the role there that they're not qualified for, which bit overrides, which is the most important on the priority list. And if they're not, are there ways to then like train them up?
Well,
and is that an appropriate thing to do? Like, because that again, now you're excluding another population. So I'm going to give you an unfair advantage to train you up.
Sorry, Rach. I think having qualifications for a job, if I am doing customer service to this one particular community and this is the language they speak, I don't think there's any problems with having like levels of qualifications so that you can make sure you meet your customer needs. But I go back to your organization's mission and your organization's values. And everyone should be hired according to that. Are you a person that fits into those components? If you are not, it doesn't matter that you speak this language, or it doesn't matter that you know this technical skill very well. And I've seen this. We see this in healthcare all the time, and we see it a lot with physicians. Oh, they're the best and the only one that can do the something, 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 something. And it's like, okay, but they treat their staff like crap, and they treat your patients like crap. So they might be the only one that can do the thing, but they don't culturally fit with you. So at some point you've got, and maybe it does come down to priorities. At some point, my opinion is you've got to prioritize who your organization is, culturally what your organization's going to be, and hire to that. In some instances, you can train up. You can train. I'm a strong believer, and I would rather hire for culture and train technically. But in some cases, there's technical skills that you need to know. I think we have, and I don't always know that you can train the other way. The other way is very difficult. So I say sometimes, this is why let's treat our employees really good. Let's make sure we're engaging employees and we're not burning them out, because the right employees are very difficult to find. Mm-hmm. And two, sometimes you got to take time to find the right employees. We can't just try and fit square pegs into round holes. Yes. It will inevitably come back to bite you. And by the way, I'm going to do my little plug. It's going to cost you more money. It's going to cost you more money.
It takes time. It takes time, and you have to be willing to invest the time to get the right person for the right job. You can't just say, well, this is who applied, and this is the best out of the two. And
this is the pool.
This is all we got. Sorry. It's like, no, that's not. You're setting yourself.
Then we go back. Then we switch up our strategy again.
Yes.
You pay on the front or you pay on the back. And the back is always more expensive.
Yeah. And just to close up my story, that was exactly my point. That this person that was hired, and it happened a couple times, they provided worse service to the clients because they brought
in their language.
They brought in their perspectives of how, or their bias of how a community is and who was telling the truth. And instead of focusing on customer service, providing what they were brought into, they brought these other ideas into it, and we didn't.
The rest of their baggage.
The rest of their baggage.
So not super emotional intelligent either.
yeah. And anyways, to your point, Andy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Well, and thank you so much for joining us. So fun to chat. This is great. We, as always, go where we need to. And I don't know about you all, but this is certainly where I needed to go. I'm feeling super energized and feel very connected to you all. So we'd love to have you back anytime you want to chat.
No, definitely. Next time I'll stick on with emotional intelligence or whatever the topic was. This is good. I like the energy that you guys bring. I think you guys are doing a great job. I think we need more of this conversation. We do need to be kind, I think, to people. And you guys definitely display that. And
thank you.
Thank you so much, Eden.
Until next time, take care. Bye-bye.